by putting his hands up and saying, "You're the one with the gun, bro. I don't have a gun." And then the defendant shoots him.
And he brutally killed her.
Bobby Solis faced accusations of shooting John Eric Garcia during an incident at a West Side apartment. Tensions ran high in the courtroom as 911 calls from the night John Eric Garcia was killed were played for everyone to hear. Both Garcia's girlfriend and aunt had called the police, their voices filled with urgency and fear.
"We're coming down, we heard gunshots. And when we went out, I told her it's gunshots. And when we went out, he was laying on the floor bleeding."
According to an arrest affidavit, Bobby Solis and John Eric Garcia had a long-standing feud. Witnesses reported seeing Garcia head to the parking lot of an apartment complex in the 1100 block of Callahan Road, where he met Solis. Police were able to link Solis to the scene using surveillance footage and cell phone records. In court, prosecutors presented crime scene photos and other evidence to the jury, including several shell casings recovered from the scene, one of which had even struck a nearby apartment. Solis's defense attorney argued that both men were members of the Mexican mafia and had a history of animosity. While Solis admitted to being at the scene, he insisted he did not fire the fatal shots, claiming someone else standing beside him pulled the trigger. After deliberating for about 2 hours, the jury found Bobby Solis not guilty. Adlai Mestre, a 24-year-old man from Tijeras, appeared before a judge after being accused of brutally killing his family and shooting their dog. The Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office reported that when they arrived at the scene, they found Mestre covered in blood and holding a gun. During the hearing, a BCSO agent detailed the grim crime scene, describing gun casings scattered around the house and the shocking violence that unfolded. At one point, Mestre interrupted his defense attorney, expressing his desire to speak on his own behalf, adding an unsettling layer to the already intense proceedings.
You could see drag marks, blood that went over various bushes and trees and down into the ravine.
Detectives arrived at a Tijeras home on Sunday after the landlord next door reported hearing gunshots. Upon arriving, they found Adlai Mestre covered in blood and discovered the bodies of his father, mother, and younger sister, all of whom had been shot. The investigation revealed that the family members had sustained gunshot wounds, and the scene was described as a tragic and brutal crime scene.
And we located them in the ravine face down, lying on top of one another.
In court, the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, BCSO, revealed critical details from the investigation. Deputies testified that they found 10 9mm casings scattered throughout the house, alongside evidence indicating the victims had suffered blunt force trauma in addition to gunshot wounds. The family's dog had also been shot 3 times. Despite being found alive, the dog's injuries were so severe that animal control ultimately had to euthanize it. To support their argument for keeping Adlai Mestre in custody, state prosecutors presented surveillance footage depicting Mestre kicking a hole in a wall while at the sheriff's station, further emphasizing his volatile behavior. During the court proceedings, as state prosecutors detailed evidence of Adlai Mestre attempting to clean up the crime scene, Mestre raised his hand, signaling that he wanted to address the court. His defense attorney advised him to remain silent, but Mestre eventually interrupted, claiming that his medication had been stolen and that his actions stemmed from fear, including his attempt to escape.
I have a lot I have to say. May the media please get pictures of the corpses, because my father was throwing this up and my mother was throwing this up, and their wounds were healed and blackened. May the media, may you please release the photos to the media, because I'm fighting for my life.
Mestre's attorney contended that he would benefit from being released under strict supervision and receiving the appropriate medication. However, the judge ruled in favor of the state's argument, emphasizing that Mestre poses a significant danger to the community. Consequently, the judge ordered Mestre to remain in custody while awaiting trial. He faces multiple charges, including 3 counts of murder, cruelty to animals, and escape from custody. Zachary Vargas, a 22-year-old, was charged in 5 different cases, including the murder of a boy in 2021. He reached a plea deal in which some of the charges against him were dropped in exchange for his guilty plea.
It's the state of Texas versus Zachary Alexander Vargas.
Vargas faced the weight of his actions with 5 charges on his record, the most severe being an aggravated kidnapping from 2020 and the murder of Markael Ross on January 25, 2021. Ross was shot and killed outside a home on Bellcross near West Commerce Street after a confrontation with Vargas. Police say Ross came to Vargas's house to buy something, and after an argument, Vargas shot him while he was on the ground, then shot him again as he tried to flee. In court, Vargas pleaded no contest to both the aggravated kidnapping and murder charges, and the state dropped the remaining 3 charges as part of a plea deal. The judge then moved on to sentencing Vargas.
I find you guilty of the murder of Markael Ross, and in such I set your punishment as per your agreement with the state at 30 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and get Mr. Vargas ready so that he may be transported to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice at the earliest convenience of the sheriff.
Vargas was sentenced to 30 years for the aggravated kidnapping, with that sentence running concurrently to the one for murder. This meant he would serve both sentences at the same time, not consecutively. As part of the plea deal, 3 of the 5 charges, including aggravated robbery, were dropped. Vargas will be eligible for parole after serving half of his 30-year sentence. The jury faced a pivotal question. Was it self-defense or murder? Richard Vallejo stood accused of killing Andrew Gomez in June 2020 in East Bezar County. Prosecutors alleged that Gomez, who was there to check on overdue rental tires, was shot 6 times during a confrontation with Vallejo. Surveillance footage from Vallejo's home captured the moment Vallejo arrived, exited his vehicle with a gun in hand, and approached Gomez, who had been sitting at a table with Vallejo's father.
Gun still in his hand. And he says, "You want to be threatening me, bro?" And Andrew responds by putting his hands up and saying, "You're the one with the gun, bro. I don't have a gun." And then the defendant shoots him.
According to the defense, Andrew Gomez was the aggressor and was threatening Richard Vallejo. They argued that Vallejo acted in self-defense, claiming the shooting was a response to a perceived danger.
He went over there to administer a beating. He was going to teach my client a lesson about not paying his bill and not doing what he was supposed to do. So when the evidence is going to show that when Richard Vallejo got that message, he freaked out.
The defendant testified that Andrew Gomez had sent him text messages he interpreted as threats, including one indicating that Gomez was waiting for him at his parents' home. Both the text messages and the surveillance footage were presented as evidence in court. However, Vallejo's testimony failed to sway the jury. Ultimately, he was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 30 years. Sierra Patino was found by first responders, her body wrapped in a blanket and hidden in a closet. The discovery sent shockwaves through those on the scene. As the investigation unfolded, her mother's boyfriend, Santiago Esparza, was charged with tampering with a human corpse.
Santiago Esparza Jr.?
Esparza shook his head as the judge in the state detailed his criminal history, including past assaults and the disturbing instances where he had physically harmed his own son.
His entire criminal history is full of assaultive and violent offenses involving both adults and children.
Did you want to hear the allegations in the warrant, Mr. Esparza? Okay.
On August 23, 2019, Esparza was reportedly giving his girlfriend's daughter, Sierra, a bath. Sierra's mother, Priscilla Torres, told police that when she tried to enter the bathroom, the door was locked, and Esparza refused to let her in. When she finally managed to get inside, she saw bruises on Sierra's body and what looked like a bruise on her forehead. Just 4 days later, Sierra's condition worsened. She stopped eating, began vomiting, and was losing consciousness. Torres later described how she handed Sierra to Esparza, who placed the girl on the bed and tried to perform CPR, using one hand for chest compressions and the other to pinch her nose while giving rescue breaths. Sadly, it didn't help. Torres then told police that she put Sierra in a green jumper, wrapped her in blanket, and put her body in a closet in the bedroom. She admitted that she and Esparza stayed in the apartment for 3 more days, with Sierra's body still inside.
Based on that and the allegations in this particular case, Mr. Esparza, I am going to set your bond at $100,000.
Torres told police that after Sierra's death, she and Esparza left the apartment for 3 days, staying at a hotel and visiting friends. It wasn't until the morning of September 2nd that Torres insisted they return to the apartment. It was then that she called 911 due to the severe decomposition of the body. Medical examiners were unable to determine a cause of death, meaning no charges could be filed in that regard. However, because the couple allowed the body to decompose, charges of tampering with evidence were filed against Esparza. Esparza, who was considered the mastermind behind the tragic case, was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Meanwhile, Torres' sentence remains pending to this day. Alex Guajardo was involved in a tragic incident that led to the loss of his wife, Caitlin, and their unborn son. In court, Guajardo accepted full responsibility for his actions, addressing both the judge and Caitlin's family. Caitlin, just 20 years old, was an aspiring artist and a loving mother when she became a victim of domestic conflict.
Yes, come here. Come see Mama.
I have replayed this day over in my head for the past 5 years and 2 months.
Alex Guajardo pleaded guilty to 2 counts related to the loss of his wife and unborn son. According to Caitlin's mother, Melanie, Caitlin's tragic passing might have been avoided. Just 1 day before the incident, Caitlin followed the advice given to individuals facing domestic challenges by contacting law enforcement. Alex was taken into custody and booked into the Harris County Jail, but was released on a personal recognizance bond. 17 hours later, the situation escalated, leading to a devastating outcome. He was subsequently rearrested by the Harris County Sheriff's Office and has remained in custody since.
She was a hero. She had him arrested and she stood up to him, and it was over. And the justice system let him out and with a signature, and he brutally killed her.
The case has become a pivotal moment in the discussion on bail reform, with policymakers using it as an example to advocate for legislative change. The Harris County District Attorney emphasized the importance of reassessing current laws and implementing stricter measures to prevent similar situations. Ultimately, Alex Guajardo received 2 life sentences, along with an additional 10 years for possession of a prohibited item while in custody. In Waukesha County, prosecutors have brought charges against a father whose 2 sons were killed in a tragic crash following a police chase. The boys, Paul Ison Vincent and Zapolian Vincent, lost their lives near Gulf Road and Graywood Lane, while their sister and cousin were seriously injured. The father, Vincent, faces multiple charges, with prosecutors stating that although he didn't intend to kill his sons, his reckless driving while fleeing from a Waukesha sheriff's deputy showed complete disregard for the safety of others on the road. The boys were ejected from the car and died instantly. Vincent, who was also injured in the crash, appeared in court in a wheelchair. The pursuit began when he tried to evade a traffic stop for driving on I-94 without license plates, with the deputy recording speeds of nearly 100 miles per hour just before the crash happened.
The force and the velocity with which this collision occurred, the fact that they weren't seatbelted in any fashion, led to this horrific crash.
The boy's cousin and their younger sister were also thrown from the car during the crash. One of the girls suffered the loss of her left arm, while Vincent's girlfriend sustained critical injuries.
I don't think it's hyperbole to say that the allegations in this case are amongst the most horrific that I've seen.
The court commissioner set Vincent's bail at $1.5 million, a figure even higher than what prosecutors had requested. The commissioner explained that Vincent's reckless driving, coupled with his alleged use of marijuana before the crash, were significant factors in the tragic events that unfolded.
I agree that the allegations are not those that you went out and purposely caused the injuries or the deaths, but you put all of those ingredients into a circumstance and then drive off at 100 miles an hour on a curvy road in the dark, and this is what happens.
Prosecutors revealed that Vincent had a long history of driving without a license, with 12 convictions for driving while suspended over the past 10 years. At just 29 years old, he had never held a valid license and shouldn't have been behind the wheel at all. Now facing 10 felony charges in this case, Vincent is being held in the Waukesha County Jail. In September, he pleaded guilty to 5 charges, including possession of a firearm by a convicted felon and injury by use of a vehicle while under the influence of a controlled substance. 13 additional charges were dismissed, but read into the court record for sentencing. A Waukesha County judge sentenced Vincent to 35 years in prison, along with 32 years of extended supervision. In a deeply unsettling case from Gwinnett County, 34-year-old Natiela Barros is now in custody, charged with the murder of her stepdaughter, Syra Barros.
Ma'am, you have 4 felony charges. Do you know what they are?
Natiela Barros appeared before a judge to understand the charges she faces. During the hearing, Barros stated that she is a stay-at-home mom. However, the judge informed her that given the seriousness of the charges, he was not at liberty to grant her bond.
Do you understand that? Do you know what that means for you? You're going to be here for a while.
According to an arrest warrant, the murder of Sarah occurred at a residence on Vine Street Trace near Bethlehem. Prosecutors allege that Natiela Barros used a wooden rolling pin to beat her stepdaughter approximately 20 times, including to the top of the child's neck. After the attack, Barros reportedly refused to seek medical attention for the girl. She then called her husband, Cledir Mendez Barros. The girl's father, who rushed home, attempted CPR and called 911, but it was too late to save Sarah. Natiela Barros has since been charged with multiple offenses, including first-degree child cruelty, aggravated assault, felony murder, and malice murder.
I asked one of the police officers what was going on. He said it was something tragic. Nice and happy family to me.
A neighbor of the Barros family was reportedly shocked to witness the police activity outside their home, not realizing the extent of the tragedy that had occurred. Cledir Mendez Barros was charged with second-degree cruelty to children and second-degree felony murder for his failure to protect his daughter from the abuse inflicted by his wife, Natiela Barros. On September 16, 2024, a jury convicted Cledir Barros, 38, of child cruelty after prosecutors argued he did nothing to intervene while his daughter suffered at the hands of his wife. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Meanwhile, Natiela Barros faces murder charges in connection to Sarah's death, though her case is still ongoing. In 2019, Natasha Ellis from New Carlisle was convicted of murder in adult court for her involvement in the brutal stabbing of her friend's mother. On May 23, 2019, the girl attacked her friend's family in their home on North Church Street. The victim, 36-year-old Lee A. Moore, succumbed to her injuries, while the friend's father and 17-year-old brother were also injured but survived. Throughout the hearings, both girls involved showed little emotion. One of the girls, the daughter of 2 of the victims, was reported by deputies to have helped plan the attack on her own family.
Number 2019-0451.
During the hearings, the 2 teen girls, both charged in connection with a brutal attack, appeared in court separately. They were handcuffed and dressed in orange jumpsuits, showing little emotion. Family members of the first girl could be heard sobbing softly, while those of the second girl were visibly distressed, teetering on the edge of tears. One of the victims, Paul Greer, sat nearby, bandaged and visibly emotional as he listened to the charges against his daughter, which included 1 count of murder. The second girl, 15 years old, Natasha Ellis, faced similar charges, including 1 count of murder and 2 counts of felonious assault. Both girls entered denials for all charges.
The first charge is a charge of murder.
Or even not at all, but at least hear me out. I want you to know I'm sorry for everything that happened to you and your family. I'm sorry for the attack on you. All that you want to do, I know you had a lot. Your daughter Yaka is locked up facing the same charges, and everyone in your family having to deal with all this. I'm also sorry for the trauma that everyone, especially you, had to deal with that night. I know you hate me and probably wishing I would stop talking to you right now,
Ellis, during her trial, claimed that she was trying to protect her friend, who she alleged was being abused. She stated that, in her view, killing the family was the only way to resolve the situation.
Do you understand the nature of the case and the facts of it as described by the prosecutor?
Yes, sir.
Ellis entered into a plea deal, admitting to charges of both murder and attempted murder. As part of the agreement, several charges were dropped, and she agreed to testify against her co-defendant, who remains in juvenile court. Ellis was sentenced to 15 years to life for the murder, and an additional 11 to 16.5 years for the attempted murder. After a psychological evaluation determined she could not be rehabilitated in the juvenile system, Ellis will serve her time in an adult prison. Jason Thornburg, a 44-year-old man from Fort Worth, Texas, was involved in a series of shocking crimes that unfolded in 2021. Thornburg invited 3 individuals, David Lueras, Lauren Phillips, and Maricruz Matis, to his motel room in Euless, Texas, under the guise of friendship. Authorities later discovered that these individuals tragically lost their lives, and their remains were found in a dumpster in Fort Worth. Investigators linked the crime to Thornburg, who was arrested shortly thereafter. During the investigation, Thornburg admitted to these acts and confessed to earlier incidents, including the death of his girlfriend, Tanya Begay, in 2017, and his roommate, Mark Jewell, in 2021. Thornburg claimed his actions were driven by a religious belief, stating that he felt compelled to commit these acts as sacrifices. His statements and behavior during the investigation drew widespread attention to the case. Thornburg's trial began in 2024, where his defense argued for leniency based on mental health issues, while the prosecution emphasized the premeditated nature of his actions. Testimonies revealed a pattern of planning and an ongoing threat to society. The jury found Thornburg guilty of capital murder on November 20th, 2024.
If you need examples of his executive functioning working just fine, go listen to his statement again. I couldn't use my chainsaw because that would be too loud and I would get caught. I have to use my knife. I can't carry out the bodies like that. That would be too obvious. I need to get my car back. I need to go buy some bins and load them up in my car. That's executive functioning. I need to go dump these bodies in a dumpster 30 miles away to distance myself from the crime. That's executive function. I need to light the bodies on fire because once I've done it twice before and I know that works, and I need to destroy the fingerprints. That is executive functioning. They can talk about a mild TBI, fetal alcohol exposure.
10 minutes, John.
Thank you, Judge. Meth-induced psychosis. Using meth and then making bad decisions isn't mitigating, right? None of this explains why he did what he did. None of this reduces his moral blameworthiness. Every time somebody was asked to tie these diagnoses to what we saw in these crimes, they're unable to do so. And while I'll leave it with this, the simplest explanation is the right explanation. And that is that, very simply, as Dr. Reed stated, he is a psychopath. He is evil. He is the type of evil that we want to believe doesn't exist in our community. We want to believe we are not raising our children in a world where people like Jason Thornburg exist. We want to believe we live in a world where the Bible is not a weapon, where your vulnerabilities don't make you prey to a serial killer. But so long as we live in a world where Jason Thornburg said evil will exist. And that's why these families, your families, our community, demand a yes answer.
Objection.
During the sentencing phase, prosecutors emphasized the seriousness of Jason Thornburg's crimes and the ongoing danger he posed to society. They outlined the jury's decision-making framework, focusing on two key issues: the likelihood that Thornburg would continue to pose a threat and whether mitigating factors warranted a life sentence instead of the death penalty. Regarding future dangerousness, the prosecution highlighted Thornburg's history of deliberate actions, including earlier incidents and the calculated nature of the crimes that led to his trial. They cited his ability to plan, use tools strategically, and manipulate his environment to avoid detection, arguing that these behaviors demonstrated clear forethought and contradicted claims of impulsivity or diminished capacity. Addressing mitigation, the prosecution dismissed expert testimony about Thornburg's alleged brain trauma, fetal alcohol syndrome, and history of substance abuse as insufficient to justify leniency. They pointed to his capacity for detailed planning and his continued violent behavior in custody, including crafting weapons, as evidence of his persistent threat. The prosecution concluded by portraying Thornburg as a dangerous individual whose actions represented a threat that society could not tolerate, urging the jury to find him a continuing danger and to impose the death penalty.
My sister was a beautiful and strong woman, inside and out. She had a beautiful smile, a contagious laugh, and an outgoing personality. That's who she was. I just don't see what she did to deserve what you've done to her.
Family members also gave statements.
You have been adjudged by a jury to be guilty of capital murder, and the juror has answered the special issues, making it mandatory that your punishment be death. Therefore, this court sentences you, Jason Allen Thornburg, to death. The clerk of this court shall no later than the 10th day after this court enters its order setting the date for execution, issue a warrant under the seal of this court for the execution of the sentence of death, which shall be directed to the Director of the Correctional Institutions Division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice at Huntsville, Texas, commanding the Director to proceed at the time and place named in the order of execution to carry the same into execution. This sentence shall be executed at any time after the hour of 6 p.m. on the day set for the execution by introduction of a substance or substances in a lethal quantity sufficient to cause death, and until you, Jason Allen Thornburg, are dead.
On December 4th, 2024, the jury unanimously sentenced him to death. He was subsequently moved to the Allen B. Polunsky Unit, Texas's death row facility. As with all death penalty cases in Texas, his sentence will undergo automatic appeals, which typically takes several years to resolve. In November 2023, a tragic roadside incident occurred in Caledonia Township, Michigan, resulting in the loss of 25-year-old Keegan Spencer. Known for his kindness and dedication to his work, Spencer was assisting a stray dog near the eastbound lanes of M6 when he was fatally struck by a vehicle. The driver, 19-year-old Payton Ferris, was traveling at approximately 80 miles per hour when the collision occurred.
The Kent County Sheriff's Department did a thorough investigation in this case. There was a crash reconstruction. What could be downloaded from Payton's phone, which was everything, was downloaded. I can't draw the own conclusions as to what the facts are. I have to accept them as they have been provided to me by law enforcement. And the troopers and the experts in this case drew the conclusion that excessive speed was not a factor. And that's in the report. While yes, we all agree that Payton was on his phone, making a call 13 seconds before he struck Keegan. There's no dispute about that. His phone wasn't in his hand. He wasn't texting. He wasn't on TikTok. He wasn't on a dating website. He wasn't doing something flippant and casual. He ended a phone call and continued driving. Those are the facts as have been presented to me.
The Kent County Sheriff's Department launched a detailed investigation, which included crash reconstruction and analysis of Ferris's phone records. It was determined that Ferris had ended a phone call 13 seconds before the incident. Investigators found no evidence of texting or other distractions, and excessive speed was ruled out as a contributing factor. These findings underscored the unpredictable dangers of roadside environments, especially for those working to keep others safe. In November 2024, nearly a year after the incident, Ferris entered a no-contest plea to a misdemeanor charge of moving violation causing death. This plea carried a maximum penalty of 1 year in jail and was viewed as an acknowledgement of his responsibility for the tragedy, without an admission of guilt. The legal process sought to balance accountability with the understanding that the incident was an accident.
I have a horrific crash. I have the conclusions of law enforcement that speed was not a factor, that he wasn't actually driving distracted, because if he was, it would have been a different charge. So, the recommendation from the pre-service investigation report was that Payton be placed on 12 months of probation, that he will participate in counseling, therapy, or programs as directed by probation, pay all the fees for those, and provide proof of continued attendance. That he shall complete 360 hours of community service, that he have no direct or indirect contact with the Spencer family. That's not exactly what I'm going to impose. Payton, I'm placing you on probation for 2 years. You shall participate in counseling. You shall complete 500 hours of community service. You shall have no indirect or direct contact with the Spencer family. You will have a year in jail suspended over you. If you violate your probation, a year in jail will be imposed. There is a $2,000 fine. Restitution is also going to be ordered. Because I don't have the documentation of how much Keegan's funeral cost, I can't impose that. But as soon as that is provided, you will be responsible for covering all of Keegan's funeral costs. Your license is suspended for a year. Once you do have the ability to drive, I will consider it a violation of your probation if you commit a single traffic infraction. A minor speeding ticket will be construed as a violation of your probation. While you're on probation, you may not use alcohol, controlled substances, marijuana, abuse prescription drugs. You will be subject to random testing for those substances. That will be at your expense. You will be required to take every distracted driving class and safe driving class that is available to you.
Ferris was sentenced to 2 years of probation with specific conditions, including 500 hours of community service, participation in counseling and therapy, and a $2,000 fine. He was also required to cover funeral expenses and faced a 1-year suspension of his driver's license. The court emphasized strict adherence to probation terms, warning that violations could result in a year-long jail sentence. In response to the tragedy, Spencer's family began advocating for legislative changes to enhance roadside worker safety. Their proposed Keegan's Law seeks to allow tow truck operators to use blue flashing lights, increasing visibility, and urging drivers to slow down and move over. Their efforts also aim to raise awareness of Michigan's Move Over Law, promoting safer practices for drivers near roadside workers. Adam Bennefield, 47, was convicted of second-degree murder for causing the death of his estranged wife, Ka'ira Hudson, in Cheektowaga, New York, on October 5, 2022. The case drew significant public attention due to Hudson's history of seeking protection from domestic abuse and the justice system's inability to prevent her tragic death. Ka'ira Hudson, a 30-year-old mother of 3, had previously reported instances of domestic violence involving Bennefield. She sought legal protection following a recorded incident where she was harmed. On September 28, 2022, Bennefield was arrested for that incident, but he was released the next day without bail, despite the issuance of a protective order. Hudson expressed fears for her safety and pleaded for additional protective measures, but no further action was taken. A week later, Bennefield followed Hudson while she was driving with her 2 daughters and a son. He forced her vehicle to stop at an intersection, leading to an altercation that resulted in Hudson's passing. Her daughters and son, who were present, were left deeply affected by the traumatic incident, and her family was devastated by the loss. Following the incident, Bennefield was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, aggravated criminal contempt, and 3 counts of endangering the welfare of a child. During the trial in 2023, prosecutors highlighted his history of violent behavior and disregard for court orders. Despite Bennefield's claims of innocence and allegations of mishandling evidence, the jury found him guilty on all charges.
I agree that we all lost someone special. Regarding the characterization that was stated, I want to address that, but we all lost somebody special. I lost a wife and a family, and the family that we spent time with and enjoying with the Hudson family. Some of the stuff that I understand that she stated that they didn't get, my family dropped it off to the police station when they called them, and so that they could drop it off. I don't know what happened from there, but my family tried to do the best for that. As I said, I love my wife, and she's gone, and she was taken from not only them, but from all of us. She was special, and it's hard to console as they feel as well that she's really gone. This has been a nightmare for everybody, including the court and the DA who likes to suppress evidence. However, as I said, this has been a hard time for everybody. Even though I got found guilty of these charges, obviously with the evidence not being 100% provided so that we can utilize the truth-seeking function and the fact-finding procedure, which would have benefited the public at large and the family, because there's things that the family don't know about and everything else that may have changed the whole outcome of this case, and we could get justice for all of us. Obviously in this case it hasn't taken place as of yet or today because we all lost someone. The pre-sentencing report, I have to address that as well. I did not see that pre-sentencing report. It was done a while ago. I haven't received it, not as of yet. So I don't know what's in it, and I have not been able to contest it, because I don't know what's in it. As far as the psychiatric report that was done, as I stated before, and I stand by my statement that that was either not her or she committed malpractice, and I would love to have the medical examining board review this and due process violations that has continued in this case. See, I'm here because I don't want to be here. I'm forced to be here to fight these charges.
During sentencing, Bennefield claimed to mourn the loss of his wife, expressed grievances about procedural aspects of the trial, and alleged that evidence and justice had been mishandled.
All right, thank you. You're here because the jury convicted you of brutally your
your wife.
Interrupting me while I'm talking. I don't interrupt you, so why do you keep interrupting me? I know you're the judge, but this
Okay,
supposed to be due
hear me
process.
out. I've heard enough of this narcissistic. You're a narcissist, and I'm not going to put this
It's
family
not like you're a
again.
narcissist because you're talking and you're going all.
Shut his microphone off,
Yeah,
and if you
shut my
keep
phone.
talking, I'm going to do it without you. You'll be in there. I've heard enough from you. You killed your wife. A jury of 12 convicted
A
you.
white jury that did not have any black jurors on there, and that's not law. That is a setup. So you want to send me out there, I go out there, but you know what the law is, and you haven't followed it. And neither has you, and neither has
All
you.
right.
Everybody sat here and
Hear me
stood
out.
there.
Shut up.
I'm not going to shut up. While
Get
you're
him out
talking.
of here.
Get out of here.
I want to apologize to these children, and I'm so sorry for some reason your mother ever ran into this guy. I wanted to tell him, but I couldn't take it anymore. How he could disregard the love of his child and his two stepchildren by taking a shotgun. And what I heard at this trial, he missed the first shot. He blew her finger off, and from my understanding, hit her shoulder. He could have stopped, and I want to tell him that, but it wouldn't have done any good.
His remarks were met with frustration from the judge, who interrupted him, describing his behavior as narcissistic and disruptive. The judge emphasized the harm caused to the victim's daughters and son and the family, and condemned Bennefield's actions.
So, unfortunately, under the law, I cannot send him to jail for the rest of his life without any chance of parole. But I will give him the maximum, because if anybody deserves it, he does. It is a judgment of this court that upon his conviction for the crime of murder in the second degree, that he be sentenced to an indeterminate term of imprisonment, which will have a maximum of life. The court hereby imposes a minimum of 25 years, plus the maximum fine of $5,000. With regard to the conviction of aggravated criminal contempt, he is to be sentenced to an indeterminate term of imprisonment having a minimum of 3.5 years, a maximum of 7, and by operation of law, it must run concurrently to the life sentence. Now, on the misdemeanor charges of 3 counts of endangering the welfare of a child, he is fined the maximum $1,000 for a total of $3,000. Now, the surcharge on the felony is $300, crime victim assistance fee is $25, and a $50 DNA databank fee. All fines and all surcharges are to be paid out of prison funds, and he's got a lifetime to pay these fines.
Ultimately, Judge Baller imposed the maximum sentence allowable under the law. For the conviction of second-degree murder, Bennefield was sentenced to an indeterminate term of 25 years to life imprisonment, along with the maximum fine of $5,000. For the charge of aggravated criminal contempt, he received an additional concurrent sentence of 3 to 7 years. Regarding the misdemeanor charges of endangering the welfare of a child, Bennefield was fined $1,000 for each count, totaling $3,000, along with various surcharges, including a $300 crime victim assistance fee and a $50 DNA databank fee. All fines are to be paid from his prison funds. Hudson's family expressed relief at the sentencing, but also shared their frustration with the justice system for failing to provide adequate protection. They have filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the town of Cheektowaga and its police department, citing negligence. In early September 2019, a tragic series of events unfolded in Dearborn, Michigan, involving Jamel Marquise Philson, Demario Dismuke, and an unnamed third suspect. This chain of incidents, which included armed robbery, felony murder, and larceny, left a lasting impact on the community. The events began on September 6, 2019, when the trio carried out a carjacking in Oak Park. Using the stolen vehicle, they traveled to Dearborn, where they committed multiple armed robberies. At approximately 9:35 p.m., they robbed a woman on Stedman Street, during which one of the suspects was reportedly armed with a firearm. Shortly after the initial robbery, the group encountered Sajja Khalid Al-Janabi on Bingham Street at approximately 9:52 p.m. This encounter turned fatal, as Al-Janabi was tragically shot during the robbery. Authorities allege that Dismuke fired the weapon, while Philson and the third suspect played active roles in the crime. The incident deeply shocked the local community and prompted an immediate and thorough investigation by law enforcement.
People of the State of Michigan versus Demario Lawant Dismuke, case number 19-S5333. Appearance, please. Thank you. People of the State of Michigan versus Jamel Marquise Philson, case number 19-S5332. Appearance, please.
Nicholas Stern on behalf of the defendant, who stands to my right, Your Honor.
Thank you. And for the people?
Good afternoon again, Your Honor. Patrick Musk on behalf of the people, P51482, and seated to my left is Michelle Rollins, ROLLINS, and intern of our office. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. Yeah. And is it Dismuke? Dismuke. All right. And gentlemen, you are before the court for purposes of arraignment on felony charges. Specifically, it is alleged as follows. On or about 9/6/2019, count 1, homicide, felony murder. It is alleged, in the perpetration or attempted perpetration of a larceny that you did murder one Sajja Khalid Al-Janabi.
The suspects were soon apprehended and faced serious charges. Philson and the third individual were charged with felony murder, larceny, and armed robbery. Dismuke faced additional charges, including assault with intent to murder, highlighting the severity of the crimes committed.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would note that Mr. Philson has been charged in another incident related to this event with fleeing and looting, receiving and concealing motor vehicle out of in Detroit. He has pending investigations regarding admissions that he made in this case for carjacking and non-fatal shooting charges. And of course, the allegations include felony murder, which allows the court to remand Mr. Philson, and that's what I'd be requesting for Mr. Philson. Mr. Dismuke has had unsuccessful attempts at probation in the juvenile system.
He was on a tether at the time, correct?
Yes, he was, Judge. He was on a GPS tether at the time that this offense is alleged to be committed.
All right.
And based on his waiver, you're allowed to remand him to the juvenile detention center as well. We'd ask for remands on both individuals, sir.
All right. On behalf of Mr. Dismuke, anything with regard to bond?
Yes, Your Honor. My client is 14 years old. He has had a little bit of trouble with the law in the past. I'd like the court to keep in mind he is innocent until proven guilty of all charges, as well as any investigations prosecution may be pursuing. He does have a constitutional right to a reasonable bond. I ask that the court consider one.
Thank you. For Mr. Philson.
Similar, Your Honor, Mr. Philson, I'm unaware of what statements were made during this investigation or what other pending charges. I know what he's here for right now. Again, the Constitution affords him the right to a reasonable bond, and I ask the court to consider one.
The prosecution emphasized the seriousness of the allegations and requested that both defendants be remanded without bond. The court cited legal provisions allowing the denial of bond in murder cases and granted the prosecution's request for remand. In September 2022, Philson was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to a prison term of 16 to 30 years. He is currently serving his sentence at the Macomb Correctional Facility, with his earliest possible release date set for September 2035. Details regarding the outcomes for Dismuke and the unnamed third suspect remain unclear. In 2015, Michael Shaver, a Disney World monorail mechanic and aviation enthusiast, mysteriously disappeared. Concerns arose among his family and friends when they lost contact with him. Laurie Shaver, his wife, claimed Michael had left voluntarily, offering conflicting explanations about his whereabouts. Despite the family's persistent worries, Laurie maintained that Michael was alive, creating a cloud of suspicion around her. 3 years later, in February 2018, investigators discovered human remains buried beneath a concrete slab in the backyard of the Shaver family home in Claremont, Florida. The remains were later identified as Michael Shaver. Laurie, the last person known to have seen Michael alive, was taken into custody for questioning. Despite denying involvement in his death, her explanations and behavior deepened the suspicions against her. In 2019, Laurie Shaver was formally charged with second-degree murder and other offenses, including tampering with evidence. Prosecutors alleged that Laurie had killed Michael, buried his body in the backyard, and poured concrete over the site in an effort to conceal the crime. The trial began in late 2024. During the proceedings, the prosecution presented damning evidence of Laurie's efforts to cover up Michael's death. This included her impersonation of him online, using his accounts to send messages to family and friends, creating the illusion that he was still alive. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Laurie Shaver guilty of second-degree murder.
To downplay this, I think it was Mr. Buxman questioning the witness, saying, well, you're not surprised that there's no link between that, given the degraded condition of the straps that were found in the grave. Ignoring the fact that possibly there was no connective link, being there was never at any time any DNA or evidence on those straps. The same way with the tarp. There was a blue tarp. Reminded the court that I brought out on cross-examination, the state did not take it upon themselves to do any kind of forensic analysis to see who, if anybody, had purchased that tarp. Nor did they do any DNA analysis on that tarp to see if it had been drug across the ground or how it got to the gravesite. I would bring that to the attention of the court. There was also testimony, unrefuted, from the medical examiner that there were buccal swabs connected to Michael Shaver, which indicated that there had been some force or trauma at a point post-death or after the death of Michael Shaver. It was testified, and the court heard testimony that the boyfriend at that time, Mr. Townsend, had, they believe, removed the body only to return it later. There was no evidence that Laurie Shaver had moved the body, and that could not be accounted for. That was brought out on evidence. It was likewise objected to throughout the trial continuously as to the form of the introduction by the state. I brought to the attention of the court that the state entirely relied on circumstantial claims of evidence. And that would be, it was always, everything the state declared was going to be a timeline link, anything that came into evidence, whether it was the gun, whether it was the sale of guns, whatever it was, that would be their claim.
However, Laurie's defense argued that Michael had been abusive and suggested that their daughter might have accidentally shot him while trying to protect her mother. They argued that the prosecution's case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and lacked definitive proof linking Laurie to the crime.
Void in all of our lives. The devastating loss has not only taken away a beloved family member, but also deeply impacted his two innocent children. Michael Shaver was a son, a brother, a father, an uncle, and a friend. He was a kind, loving, and humorous soul. He cherished his family and friends more than anything. Despite the challenges he faced, he always found a way to connect with those he loved. However, his life was tragically cut short at the young age of 33. Laurie Shaver's manipulative and narcissistic behavior isolated Michael from his family and friends, depriving us of a chance to be part of his life. Her actions not only led to his tragic death, but also perpetuated a harmful narrative that tarnished his memory and caused further pain to his loved ones, especially his children. Her actions did not stop the day she took his life and buried him within sight in her backyard. She continued to make choices that would impact both Michael's memory and the people around him for years to come, from stealing his identity, impersonating his likeliness, marrying a new husband over his body, and putting the weight of a terrible tragedy on the shoulders of his daughter, having her to maintain that lie for years. Laurie Shaver's actions not only ended Michael's life, but also stole his future. She deprived him of the chance to live life to its fullest, raise his children, spend time with his family, experience personal growth. For the past 9 years, she has walked free, while we have endured the pain of his absence and relived the events through the investigation. She has witnessed the growth of his children, all while shaping their perspective of him with lies and distortions. These stolen years can never be returned, and the void left in our lives is immeasurable. The impact of Laurie Shaver's actions will forever scar our family. We mourn the loss of Michael and grieve for his children, who has been robbed of their father's love and guidance. The loss of Michael is a wound that will never fully heal. While justice may offer some solace, it cannot restore the life that was stolen or mend the broken hearts.
The sentencing hearing, held on November 26, 2024, was emotional. Michael's family and friends provided powerful victim impact statements. His brother, Brian Douglas Shaver, spoke about the immense void left in their lives following Michael's death. He described Michael as a kind, loving individual devoted to his family. Brian detailed Laurie's manipulative behavior and actions, including isolating Michael from his loved ones, stealing his identity, and perpetuating lies to shield herself from accountability.
Friendship and shared tasks impressed me that he was an incredibly intelligent and funny person. You couldn't meet a nicer guy. I enjoyed getting to know him and looked forward to the future friendship and plans we shared, all now shattered and gone. As to him being a person and parent, I can say that I've never met a man so worried about the welfare of his children. He endured all, including being murdered in hopes of protecting them. As a result, he was a badly battered husband, always bearing the brunt of Laurie's outbursts and physical attacks. The court had only one instance to work with, and a bad one at that. Just after the event, I asked Mike why he went to jail when she attacked and overwhelmed him. The photos clearly showed him with bleeding head trauma, torn clothing, and disoriented look. His statement to me was, "The police showed up and I told them that she had threatened all of us with her gun. I was scared she would hurt the kids, so I tried to take it away from her. She hit me repeatedly in the head with the gun, ripped off my pocket trying to get the truck keys, and broke a bunch of other stuff too. The police listened to her and seemed to think I was abusing her and told us that they had to arrest somebody as it was a domestic violence case. I thought it would be best to protect the kids by not having their mother go to jail, so I agreed to be arrested." It was noted in the trial he had moved into a room at the hangar without explanation. He did so to remain close to the children as possible. Literally everyone on our team urged him to leave her ASAP, but he realized that domestic violence arrest would easily put the kids back in her care. Based on that, he tried to create a peace with her and moved back in. When I asked why, which nobody else did, he told me, "I want to be there to protect my kids. If he had any failing, it was in self-preservation. If you can't survive for yourself, you can't be there for anyone else. That's why I say I have never seen a man more dedicated to his children than Mike. If spirits exist after this life, I'm sure his is gutted at the lies and brainwashing used on his daughter. Those of us who know them all 100% know that things stated she claimed to have done so were impossible simply based on her tiny size at the time. He was a smart, funny, caring, and wonderful man. The world is truly a worse place without him in it. I think of him often, and the pain and frustration of his murder leaves me angry every time."
A close friend highlighted Michael's intelligence and skills, emphasizing the senselessness of the crime. Mike endured significant challenges in his relationship with Laurie Shaver, facing isolation and abuse. Despite this, he chose to remain in the household to protect his family. Friends and colleagues repeatedly urged him to leave the toxic environment, but Mike prioritized his family's safety above his own well-being. His dedication to shielding them from harm exemplified his selflessness and commitment as a parent.
Laurie Shaver Filmer, in case number 2020 CF 2361, having been found guilty by a jury of your peers of the offense of murder in the second degree with a firearm and having been adjudicated guilty of the offense of murder in the second degree with a firearm, the court hereby sentences you to a term of life in the Florida Department of Corrections. Standard fines, fees, and costs will be assessed. Mandatory court costs will be assessed. You will have 30 days to appeal.
The judge, citing Laurie's manipulative behavior and lack of remorse as aggravating factors, sentenced her to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In addition to the life sentence, Laurie was ordered to pay standard court costs. Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.